It's time for America Outdoors Radio, the show that covers the outdoor scene across the US of A and the entire continent. Fishing, hunting, conservation, outdoor recreation, and great destinations, we cover it all every week. It's your country, your outdoors. Let's explore it together with your host, John Kruse.
Welcome to the show. It's hard to believe it's just a few days away from Christmas and just over a week from New Year's Day. Boy, oh boy, 2024, it has really flown by. I hope it's been a good year for you, and I hope that you're going to be able to spend some time with family and friends this holiday season. I know some of you tuning in today are on the road as we speak, and if that's true, safe travels. That's my wish and hope for you. This week on the show, we've got some great guests for you. In just a few minutes, you're going to hear from Trey Carskadon. He's with O'Loughlin Trade Shows, because once we start the new year, that's right, it is show season. And one of the first ones that's taking place in the nation is the Portland Boat Show. It's happening at the Expo Center in Portland, Oregon. This is a huge boat show that draws visitors not just from the West Coast, but even the northern tier states all the way to the Great Lakes. A lot of them are after those welded aluminum fishing boats that are on display and on sale here. The dates for the show are January 8th through the 12th. You can find out more at pdxboatshow.com, but you'll definitely want to hear what Trey has to tell you about this massive boat show. After that, we're going to talk to Trevor Hubbs, Communications Director for the Mule Deer Foundation, and they have launched a brand new offshoot for this organization called the Blacktail Deer Foundation. Yes, blacktail deer, both Columbia and Sitka blacktail, are found along the West Coast in Northern California, Western Oregon, Western Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. And it turns out they need some love and attention and care just like mule deer or whitetail deer too. Trevor will tell you more about this new organization and how you can support it during the show today. Our final guest, well, that would be Drew Conover. He wrote a great article for Outdoor Life. You can check out at outdoorlife.com about the history of the iconic Bowie Knife. Or is it Bowie Knife? We're going to ask Drew about that. But as you probably know, Jim Bowie, that famous frontiersman who met his end at the Alamo, fighting off Santa Anna soldiers with his Bowie knife, went down in history for that knife. And boy, oh boy, there's a lot of history around it that started in the early 1800s and goes on to this day. By the way, this portion of the show is brought to you by our friends at Worksharp. And if you're looking for some last-minute Christmas gifts or stocking stuffers, well, Worksharp has got some great ones for you. They got a brand new folding knife sharpener that will come in really handy for hunters who are hitting the field. Their classic pocket knife sharpener and guided field sharpener are also great stocking stuffers, and they've got bigger gifts too. Electric knife sharpeners for both the kitchen and the shop. You can find them at quality sporting goods stores all over the country. You can also order them online at worksharptools.com, but I can't promise you it's going to get to you before Christmas at this point. Next, let's go ahead and talk about some outdoors news. We'll start off with a story broken by the Daily Sentinel and shared by multiple media outlets about Ben Milliken. That's a very famous YouTuber and a Bassmaster Elite Series pro who was arrested this month and charged with freshwater fishing tournament fraud. Now, this isn't the tournament fraud that you're probably thinking of, where somebody is catching bass in one lake and weighing them in at another. No, this is a little less dramatic than that. It turns out Milliken was fishing in February, and he caught a huge largemouth bass. Now, in Texas, they have a share lunker program where if you catch one of these massive bass, you can turn it in, and you may be eligible to win up to $5,000. So Milliken caught the bass. He turned it in with an entry form. And then this fall, prior to distributing prizes at the Toyota Share Lunker Banquet, it was discovered Milliken did not have a valid fishing license at the time the fish was caught, and he allegedly knowingly falsified the contest tournament entry form. That's according to Maggie Berger, a spokesman for Texas Parks and Wildlife. So Milliken was disqualified from the program and cited for fishing without a valid license. Milliken turned himself in for freshwater tournament fishing fraud, had his mugshot taken, and was released. Milliken, in a statement released on social media, said his arrest was due to a complete misunderstanding. Having said that, Milliken is owning this in a certain degree. He's definitely putting out some clothes you can buy to help him with his legal fees. We'll see how this all turns out in the end, but I suspect it's just going to be a small bump in the road for Ben Milliken. In other news, some states are better for deer hunting than others. We'll start off with my home state of Washington State, where in 2023, 125,603 deer tags were purchased by hunters. As for the success rate, well, statewide, 22,724 deer were harvested. That's for the entire season last year. Now, head to Missouri, where the Missouri Department of Conservation reports that 14,607 deer were harvested during the late antlerless portion of the firearms season between December 7th and the 15th. That's right, 14,607 deer in just 8 days. The top harvest counties were Pike with 477 deer harvested, Callaway with 391, and Lincoln with 382. And the hunting season is not over in Missouri. Archery deer hunting continues all the way through January 15th. Another place where they harvest a lot of deer? Well, believe it or not, New York. Hunters harvested an estimated 209,781 deer during the 2023 hunting season. As a matter of fact, on average, according to the National Deer Association, 41% of deer hunters nationwide successfully harvested at least one deer in the 2022 to 2023 hunting season, and 17% took two or more. Some other factoids about hunting in the U.S. In 2022, the average antlered buck was 3.5 years old. And in New Jersey, hunters took the biggest percentage of deer with archery equipment at 65% of the harvest. When it came to muzzle loaders, Rhode Island was first place. 42% of hunters took their deer with muzzle loaders in that state. Finally, let's talk about wildlife watching. If you're in Utah, I've got something really special for you. You can ride through an elk herd on a horse-drawn sleigh or wagon at the Hardware Wildlife Management Area near Hiram. Haviland's Old West Adventures has contracted with the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources to offer the horse-drawn sleigh or wagon rides on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from December 6th through February 9th. The rides start at 10 a.m. and they end at 4 p.m. each day. Each ride lasts about 45 minutes. The fee to go on a ride is $10 for those 9 years of age or older and $4 for kids that are less than that. And toddlers and infants under 3, well, no cost for them. Tickets are only sold at the Hardware Wildlife Education Center, and you must buy them in person on the day of your ride. If you're not near the Hardware Wildlife Management Area and you want to do some wildlife watching, well, check out the Audubon Christmas Bird Count. It's an annual event that takes place during the month of December and right through New Year's, where birders, both experienced ones and amateurs, meet up at designated locations, spread out in a circle that's been designated for years, and count the birds. You're counting not just numbers, but also different species. It's citizen science, and it really helps figure out migratory patterns and population trends throughout North America. Just Google Audubon Christmas Bird Count and look for a circle near you and when the bird count's going to happen. Kind of a fun way to spend a winter's day. And speaking of fun ways to spend a winter's day, New Year's Day, like I said, it's coming up soon. And consider kicking things off at a state park near you with a first day hike. It's become a real trend for state parks around the nation to offer these hikes. A lot of them are guided along trails through state parks. Number one, it's a great way to burn a few calories from all of those holiday meals. And number two, it's a great way to welcome in the new year. Doing so in nature, it's hard to beat that. Just check out your state park's website and look for first day hikes near you and plan on lacing up those boots and getting out there on New Year's Day. Stick around, we've got more coming up to include Trey Carskadon, who's going to tell you all about the big Portland Boat Show coming up January 8th through the 12th in Portland, Oregon.
Looking for the perfect gift for the hunter or shooter in your life? Give them a Henry. These American-made lever-action guns shoot straight and have a classic Western look. Choose from a .22 caliber Henry for plinking, a heavier caliber for hunting, or even a shotgun for birds and small game. Better still, these guns come in all sorts of finishes, covering everything from use in the field or on the range to showing off the best-looking firearm in your zip code. Henry rifles and shotguns come with a lifetime guarantee. And if you help need deciding what Henry is right for you, just ask. The award-winning customer service team at henryusa.com will be happy to help you out. So, go to henryusa.com and order a free catalog and holiday gift guide. Then, find what you like, look for a dealer near you, and get a gift that will put a real smile on someone's face this holiday season. Start searching for your Henry now at henryusa.com. That's henryusa.com.
In today's news, I'm cooking a brisket. Let's go to Jill at my house to see how it's going.
This is your house and you brought me and the crew to check on your brisket?
That's correct, Jill. How's it looking?
This is a Camp Chef Woodwind Wi-Fi. You know you can check your cook right from your phone, right?
I didn't know that was an option, Jill. Well, never mind. But before you leave, can you feed the dog?
What? No.
When we get back, why is my check engine light on? The answer may shock me.
Are you looking to reel in the marketing opportunity of a lifetime? America Outdoors Radio has sponsorships available, and we offer affordable platforms to reach thousands of listeners. Find out more by contacting John Kruse through his website at americaoutdoorsradio.com.
When you think of Work Sharp knife and tool sharpeners, you probably think of sharpeners for the shop or the field, but Work Sharp has a whole lineup of sharpeners for the kitchen, too. We're talking about everything from easy-to-use manual and electric knife sharpeners to ceramic honing rods, whetstones, and the new rolling knife sharpener, an innovative manual sharpener that will do wonders for your cutlery. Make sure there's never a dull moment in your kitchen. Check out the entire product line and order today at WorkSharpTools.com. That's WorkSharpTools.com.
Welcome back to America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse. Our next stop is Portland, Oregon. You're going to want to be there in January because the 65th Annual Portland Boat Show is taking place. It kicks off Wednesday, January 8th. It runs through Sunday, January 12th. And this is a really big show. With us here to tell you more about the Portland Boat Show is Trey Carskadon with O'Loughlin Trade Shows. Trey, welcome back.
Thank you, John. Good to be with you.
So let's talk about why this is such a big show that draws people from not just the Pacific Northwest, but even the Midwest.
Yeah, it does. Across all the northern tier states, we've got one of the largest representations of sport fishing boats in the country. And, of course, this is home to a very unique style of boat, the heavy gauge welded aluminum boats that have found a place in, of course, throughout the Northwest, Northern California, into Alaska and Canada, but also back into the Great Lakes as well. And probably the best representation of heavy gauge welded aluminum boats that you'll find anywhere in the world. This show also has the unique distinction of being the largest trailerable boat show, certainly in the West and maybe one of the biggest in the country as well. And by that I mean these anything that is generally launched by trailer is pretty well represented at this show. So, it's all here, certainly the fishing boats, but wakeboard and wake surfing boats and pontoons, cruisers, runabouts, pleasure boats, PWCs, all of them.
You must have been an NFL statistician in another life to come up with a statistic like that.
Yeah. Well, so I started working these shows in the early 80s, the boat shows. And so I've been around them the better part of my life. And I've really had a chance to, the pleasure really to travel around the country and see what other folks are up to. And it was one of those things that just kind of dawned on us over the years that we really have something special with this boat show. It's roughly, 250,000 square feet of space. It's jam-packed. We have, it's mostly new, but we do have probably about, this year, and they'll be wedged in about 50,000 square feet of used boats as well. So it gives folks some options. But the beauty is just like any event like this, John, is that it gives folks an opportunity who are out shopping and thinking about this, purchasing a boat, a chance to look at them all side by side. So we have over 20 dealers in this show. There's some manufacturers represented. There's engine companies. So if you're looking for new inboard, there's accessory companies, electronics, all that. And so if folks are, either own a boat currently or they're, looking to, upgrade or get into, get started boating, you can do it all in one place and literally go from aisle to aisle to aisle rather than, from one part of the state to the other, having to, look at the things that you might be interested in.
Now, I know the last couple years have been tough for boat dealerships because interest rates have been so high. But I also know that the Fed has cut interest rates several times over the last year. Is that translating to some slightly lower interest rates for boat loans as well?
It is, John. The rates have come down a couple points, and we expect to see them probably come down another quarter point by the show. And so, yeah, it's going to be, it certainly isn't where it was, 10 years ago, but we're a lot closer than we were, a year ago, that's for sure. And it's a balancing act, really. And this is what folks have to weigh, is that there are, so you come to these shows and they sweeten the pot by making, the deals so good that even if the interest rate is a couple points higher than what it was, the discounts are so good that you're still money ahead. So, yeah, that's another way to approach it. And then a lot of times these dealers, so this really kicks off their year. They've gone several months with very slow business. The show opens and it's really an opportunity to jumpstart their business. And for some dealers, this accounts for as much as 30% of their business.
Oh, wow.
So they're very motivated to get things going. Also, and I think this is super important, John, for folks that are looking to order boats, because this is the first major boat show of the year, you get at the front of the line. So you get to the show, if you're ordering a boat, get it ordered, and you'll be at the top of the list as far as, the boats that, when they're completed. So it's also an opportunity to not only have the, completely refreshed inventories, probably the biggest inventories of the year with motivated dealers, but also an opportunity to get your boat quicker than folks that are going to be shopping at shows that are later in the year.
Let's talk about some of the boats that are going to be there. Now, you mentioned that a lot of trailerable, heavy-gauge aluminum welded boats are going to be there. And the Pacific Northwest is known for their aluminum boats. But besides just the fishing boats that you see on the Columbia River, the Great Lakes, or up in Alaska and Canada, what other kind of boats? I mean, do you have like bass boats? Do you have center console boats? Do you have pleasure boats?
All of those. So the tournament-style bass boats is probably the area that we're weakest in. There may be a few at this show. I'm not sure yet. We generally will see those at the sportsman shows.
Sure.
But outside of that, because that's a really a narrow niche market, there's just a handful of dealers in the region that do a really good job with that. But everything else is very well represented. So, for instance, the sport fishers. So these glass boats that have cabins on them with a big rear deck, used both in big water fisheries, big lakes. Certainly the Columbia and out in the ocean. We have plenty of those. We have wakeboarding and wake surfing boats, PWCs. So these pontoons, when they first came into the market, probably 30 years ago, they were really something that you found down in the South. Well, they've really taken the market here in the Northwest. And I think last year we had 70 or 80 different models of pontoon boats at this show.
Oh, wow.
So if you're in the market for a pontoon, this is absolutely the best place to be. Without a doubt, you won't find a better selection of pontoons than here. But, you have runabouts, and you have some of the big names like Grady's and Whalers, and they're all represented. Every major category of boat is represented here, and you will find some John boats and those boats that if you're getting started bass fishing or you're looking at kind of a DIY project, that's a great place to start too.
So Trey, we've got boats. What about accessories?
Well, we have a huge accessory sale, England Marine Supply. We also have some other accessory companies coming to the show. But if you're looking for something like a crab trap, absolutely the place to buy. They go out, dozens and dozens of crab traps leave the show. It's also kind of a sleeper for electronics. So there's generally some pretty deep discounts on very popular electronics available at the show. And then you have, seat companies and marine canvas, and, you have all of it here. So, yeah, accessories are a big part of the show.
Well, the bottom line is this, folks. This is going to be one heck of a boat show. Again, it's the Portland Boat Show taking place at the Expo Center in Portland, Oregon, Wednesday, January 8th through Sunday, January 12th. The website to go to find out more and to get a discount coupon is pdxboatshow.com. PDX is, of course, the airline symbol for Portland, so just go to pdxboatshow.com. Check out all the details about the Portland Boat Show. Get your discount coupon if you're attending during the week, and make plans to buy your next boat, because there's going to be some really good deals, so you're not going to want to miss out. Trey, thanks as always for sharing this with us on America Outdoors Radio.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure.
Sportsman's Cove Lodge is Alaska's best lodge, and as you know, I'm a big fan. I've been to Prince of Wales Island in southeast Alaska several times. I love the float plane ride in. I love the fishing for halibut, salmon, and cod, and I can't get enough of the fantastic food and dynamite hospitality that they offer at the lodge. Now they are building new accommodations, new rooms that'll have television. They've brought Wi-Fi to the lodge too, and they're even offering extended 7-day stays with not just fishing, but other adventures too, as well as the opportunity to have a corporate retreat. Find out more about Sportsman's Cove Lodge and book your stay today at alaskasbestlodge.com. That's alaskasbestlodge.com, and use the promo code RADIO10. That's Radio 10. Let me repeat that one more time. That's alaskasbestlodge.com and the promo code RADIO10 for 10% off your next adventure. You're back in with America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse. We've got Trevor Hubbs on the line. He's the communications manager for the Mule Deer Foundation. And the Mule Deer Foundation has launched a new, well, I guess we'll call it a track. It's the Blacktail Deer Foundation. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Let's start off talking about, the Mule Deer Foundation is all about conservation for mule deer. National Deer Association focuses on whitetail deer. There hasn't been anything really focusing on blacktail deer. Where do you find the two subspecies of blacktail deer, the Sitka blacktail deer and the Columbia blacktail deer?
Yeah, so while the Mule Deer Foundation has always had blacktail deer work in our mission, it's part of what we do, you're right. We haven't had a solo organization specifically focused on blacktail. So there's two main subspecies of blacktail. Like you mentioned, there's Columbia blacktail, which are in the lower 40 and Northern California, particularly in those coastal regions. While you'll have mule deer in all three of those states as well, blacktail will be closer to the coast in general. The Sitka blacktail deer, which very similar in appearance, maybe a little squatter, a little chubbier of a looking of a deer, prefer the rainforests of southeast Alaska, Kodiak Island. I mean, you'll find them up in the mountains, you'll find them on the beach, but again, still a very coastal deer throughout southern and southeast Alaska.
And you'll find both species in British Columbia, is that correct?
Yes, there is a magic line somewhere that Dr. Jim Heffelfinger, Steve Belinda, our conservation team will argue about for days. But nobody really knows where the line is, or at least I don't.
So let's talk about the need for a conservation organization for blacktail deer. Now, I know mule deer herds can really be decimated by hard winters. Whitetail deer herds can face that as well, along with outbreaks of diseases like blue tongue disease. But, where blacktail deer live, it's pretty temperate. Like you said, it's West Coast. They don't have these huge, winter issues. So what kind of challenges do the blacktail deer face?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not unsimilar or not dissimilar from some of the other deer species and some of the other problems you've mentioned. One of the bigger areas, the Tongass National Forest, which you see in southeast Alaska, I mean, if you've been scrolling social media, you'll see there's all kinds of arguments every year about logging versus old growth versus Do we put roads in? But all of that has an impact one way or the other. And with how science goes, you don't exactly know how something is going to be impacted until you mess it up. You can predict, you can guess, you can do a bunch of work, but you don't really know. So what we do know right now is we know that deer moving through very thick trees, so like when they come through and I hate to use the word clear cut, when they strategically trim a section in the coastal rainforest like the Tongass, when trees come back, a lot of times without kind of a structure to that plan, these trees, as growth, will come back too tight for blacktail to move through them. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't. It doesn't mean that they can't. But what it does mean is with the dramatic increase in the wolf population in southeast Alaska, it's very hard for those deer to get away from that predator. Like if you go on Alaska Fish and Game, you'll see they have all kinds of wolf trapping, wolf hunting seminars, any kind of motivation for sportsmen to get out and help knock these wolf numbers down just to preserve and protect these blacktail deer in these areas. But again, it's never one problem. So it's not, all right, we're going to knock the wolf population in half and now blacktail will rebound. I mean, it's a combination of that forest management and the wolf population to find an equitable number, or a number that works habitually together, which is a little different than what you have on Kodiak Island for the Sitka blacktail, where for there we're looking at, I don't want to say, global warming is such a hot topic. It's not so much global warming as it is climate change, or whatever you want to call it, whatever your favorite buzzword is there's a change in the amount of snow and the elevation of that snow on Kodiak. So it used to be when you're hunting Sitka blacktail on Kodiak, like, oh, they're still forest deer. You're going to shoot them on the beach. You're going to shoot them on the forest. And now we just did a project. We're about ready to do another one where we're finding a lot of deer up in the mountains. And then they're in too deep of snow. And if you did a quick Google image search on these deer, you find that the Sitka blacktails are not necessarily as designed for snow as, like, you could see a mule deer cruising through 3 feet of snow in Wyoming or, Colorado and just having a great time. Like, I mean, they're not having a great time. Nobody's having a great time if you're not skiing, but they can do it. Whereas like Sitka, they will struggle a little bit more with that, those Sitka deer. So what we're doing coming up here in January, depending on weather, it will be in January. You never know what's going to happen on Kodiak Island with the fog and the snow. But we're doing a collaring project where we're trying to track how these deer are mitigating this increased snowfall, or this, I don't want to say, just this different pattern of snowfall. Because when it's so similar for so long and deer get into a pattern and they follow the routes that their moms taught them, and when that changes, how do these deer react? What can we do as an organization and as just human stewards of the environment? What can we do to help these deer be as population focused as they can, or just get the right numbers for the amount of habitat we have that allow for hunting, that allow for all the stuff we know and love.
Okay. Now, here's a question I think a lot of our listeners are going to have. The Blacktail Deer Foundation, is it a separate nonprofit than the Mule Deer Foundation? And if you're a member of one, are you a member of the other?
Great question. So we made the decision. We want Blacktail Deer Foundation to be financially separate. It is a separate organization. The best example I can give you is a comparison of like the quail forever, pheasants forever relationship.
Right.
Certainly, folks that hunt quail will hunt pheasants. Folks that hunt mule deer will hunt blacktail a lot. You have a lot in common. We're going to do very similar work, just in different geographies of the country. But no, your Mule Deer Foundation membership will not automatically make you a Blacktail Deer Foundation member, and vice versa. So that's not, don't run out and go crazy right now. You don't have to make a decision. We'd love for you to join both. But there's I want to say 32, it's on our website here, but there's 32 chapters that have independently that they are going to be blacktail deer focused simply because of the geography that they're in.
All right.
So if you are part of, let's pull it up here. Like, let's say you are in Western Washington and you have always been a member of the Capital City Blacktail chapter. You're going to be a Blacktail Deer Foundation chapter. Now, if you'd like to maintain your Mule Deer Foundation membership, that's great. I hope you do. But there will also be a Blacktail Deer Foundation membership available to you.
I assume that these Blacktail chapters are going to be very similar to Mule Deer Foundation chapters in terms of fundraising through banquets, and then that money is going to be used for projects like you just talked about going on at Kodiak Island, or even more locally where the chapters are?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons that we felt ready at this time to really launch the Blacktail Deer Foundation. We have a method to the madness, if you will, of, all right, we know we can bring people together that care about these deer. We know we can get them together, can raise some money. And then the chapter actually has, through our chapter rewards project, they have the ability to pick and choose what habitat work or what fencing work or forestry work is important to them and can put their money in that project. So if you're in the Olympia chapter of Western Washington and you want to do some work on the Olympic National Forest and you think the Forest Service has this coming up and you want to donate to it, let's do that with your money. I mean, it jives with the mission, jives with what you want to do. It helps you locally, helps your local deer. Absolutely. So if we can keep all that stuff that we already do with the Mule Deer Foundation, we do it pretty dang well, and just transfer all that strategery, if you will, or organizational basis into a new foundation, I think we're set up really well for early success.
All right. Well, folks, if you are into blacktail deer and blacktail deer conservation and you live in Northern California or Western Oregon, Western Washington, Southeast Alaska, or maybe even British Columbia, go to blacktaildeer.org. That's the website for the Blacktail Deer Foundation. Again, blacktaildeer.org. Join today and help out those blacktail deer that you're finding on the West Coast. They could use the help, and they could use your support. Trevor, thanks so much for sharing this with us today, and I hope you have yourself a merry little Christmas.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
This portion of the show is brought to you every week by our friends at Henry Repeating Arms. It's a company I really get behind because they make all of their firearms right here in America. Now, Henry Repeating Arms is known for their classic, beautiful lever-action rifles, and they come in all sorts of different calibers. Everything from .22 caliber up to .30-30s and .357s and .45-70s, and a whole lot more. They also have recently come out with revolvers and a 9mm carbine that's great for self-defense or to have out on the ranch. And they've even got some single-shot and lever-action shotguns, too. All of their firearms are rugged, reliable, accurate right out of the box, and they all come with a lifetime satisfaction guarantee. So go to henryusa.com, check out the lineup of products they have available, look for an authorized dealer near you, and don't forget to ask for your free decals and catalog while you're there. The website again, henryusa.com. Sportsman's Cove Lodge is Alaska's best lodge, and as you know, I'm a big fan. I've been to Prince of Wales Island in southeast Alaska several times. I love the float plane ride in. I love the fishing for halibut, salmon, and cod, and I can't get enough of the fantastic food and dynamite hospitality that they offer at the lodge. Now they are building new accommodations, new rooms that'll have television. They've brought Wi-Fi to the lodge too, and they're even offering extended 7-day stays with not just fishing, but other adventures too, as well as the opportunity to have a corporate retreat. Find out more about Sportsman's Cove Lodge and book your stay today at alaskasbestlodge.com. That's alaskasbestlodge.com, and use the promo code RADIO10. That's Radio10. Let me repeat that one more time. That's alaskasbestlodge.com and the promo code Radio10 for 10% off your next adventure.
Explore the Dalles, the hub where discovery and history come together. Whether the Northwest is your home or you're on an adventure, the Dalles welcomes you. Just 80 miles east of Portland is the perfect year-round escape with a community that cares about you. 300 days of sun, breathtaking outdoor recreation, and a downtown full of the unexpected. Oh, and the rich history that began before the Oregon Trail. Start planning at explorethedalles.com.
In today's news, I'm cooking a brisket. Let's go to Jill at my house to see how it's going.
This is your house and you brought me and the crew to check on your brisket?
That's correct, Jill. How's it looking?
This is a Camp Chef Woodwind Wi-Fi. You know you can check your cook right from your phone, right?
I didn't know that was an option, Jill. Well, never mind. But before you leave, can you feed the dog?
What? No.
When we get back, why is my check engine light on? The answer may shock me.
So right now may be the perfect time for you to rethink how you pay for health care. And here's why. This time of year is decision time for a lot of people, but it's also when you can join MediShare and save even more than usual. For many families, joining MediShare means saving about $500 a month, which is a game changer for a lot of people, obviously. But what's more, MediShare members like it a lot. Their satisfaction rate is 98%. Imagine that. And Metashare is a proven thing, too, for over 30 years. It's a Christian community of hundreds of thousands of people now. And here's the thing. If you join before December 31st and you mention the promo code SHARE, they'll waive your application fee. So you save even more right off the bat. I'll give you the number here in a second, but just call and you'll get a price within 2 minutes. And again, the deadline is December 31st. So call now and you'll save even more. Here's the number, 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE 40. 855-SHARE-40.
You're back in with America Outdoors Radio. We've got a really interesting story to share with you. It's one I discovered at OutdoorLife.com. It's an article written by Drew Conover about the history of a very famous knife here in America. Drew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
So I think everybody is familiar with Jim Bowie, who was known for his Bowie knife. But I've got a question. Is it the Bowie knife or the Bowie knife that we're talking about? What's the pronunciation?
Good question. So technically, it's supposed to be Bowie knife, which is the different pronunciation than the Singer. But a lot of people pronounce it both ways.
Well, we're going to stick with Bowie for today. It started back with a big brawl back in the early 1800s, didn't it?
Yeah. In September of 1827, Jim Bowie got in a huge brawl. It was part of a duel that was between two other guys that he got involved in afterward. He was one of the seconds, which is essentially like your backup whenever you went into a duel. And he and the other seconds for the other member in the duel kind of got into a fight afterward. And he was stabbed and shot multiple times. You know, different accounts count different shots and different stab numbers. But yeah, it all started on a big fight down near Natchez, Mississippi on a sandbar where he famously nearly took off someone's arm and disemboweled another with his famous knife.
So who invented this famous knife? It wasn't Jim Bowie himself, was it?
No, actually, there's two Bowie knives. The first one came from an earlier fight, and Jim's brother, Rezin, commissioned a large knife to be made for him after he almost died in another fight. So that one just was kind of described as a large butcher's knife, like a heavy butcher's knife. After that, though, after the famous sandbar brawl, he commissioned another knife, and that was what became famous. And he made a few design changes, and that's what he carried during the Alamo, and that's really where the Bowie knives that we know today probably came from.
So the Bowie knife / Bowie knife became really popular right into the Civil War. It was considered a fighting knife, wasn't it?
Yeah, so pistols of the day were notoriously unreliable and inaccurate, and they only had one shot. So many people carried two, but a knife was something that you didn't need to reload and it was ready to go. So these large knives became very popular and people carried them for self-defense instead of a gun. But after the Civil War, revolvers became a lot more available and popular and kind of started to replace large fighting and defense knives for people's weapon of choice for personal defense.
And I know that they also were popular in the Old West. I remember reading a book years ago. I think the title was First Scalp for Custer. It was about the first punitive expedition by the U.S. military following the Battle of Little Bighorn. And Buffalo Bill Cody, I understand, had a Bowie knife himself that he used to scalp an Indian.
Yeah, they were very popular, especially in the West. It was called the Wild West for a reason. A lot of crazy things happened, and they remained popular on the frontier because a large knife like that was useful for fighting and plenty of other tasks around camp and other things. So they were most popular on the frontier. The East Coast was already fairly well established, and they weren't nearly as popular there, but certainly the farther west you got, the more important and popular they would have been.
Now, at a certain point, the Bowie knife kind of lost its relevance, didn't it? And I think you alluded to this with the popularity and functionality of revolvers. You didn't really need a fighting knife as much, but it did have a rebirth, didn't it?
Yep. So after the Civil War, there was a lot of violence, and it seems that people had their fill, and the Bowie knife began to taper off in popularity. Even though it was being made, actually Britain was one of the main manufacturers of Bowie knives, and they were importing them into the U.S., but they began to taper off as people didn't see the need for a large fighting knife. Culture was changing. It fell out of favor, and people were looking for a more useful, smaller blade. Not to say that it went out of production, but it certainly lost its prominence as the main tool that people sought after.
But in World War I, it made a comeback, and that was because troops wanted a fighting knife again when they were in the trenches.
Exactly. So a lot of people are familiar with the World War I knife. There's kind of a famous picture that's gone around, even in memes and everything, that soldier holding the knife, and it looks like it has brass knuckles and spikes on it, and it has a Bowie-shaped blade. Those were what were commissioned for World War I, but they just couldn't keep up with production, and they couldn't issue them enough. So many soldiers ended up just carrying their own Bowie knives from home and Bowie-style knives. And World War II is where they really took off, but they started to have a resurgence during World War I.
And today, Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe one of the most famous Bowie knife scenes of any film, at least these days. It's one that's probably the most quoted. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, that's not a knife, this is a knife, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to embarrass myself with a terrible Australian accent, but everyone, just about everyone has said that or heard it at some point or another, and Mick Dundee's large Bowie knife certainly made an impact and helped to bring the Bowie knife back into relevance and prominence in America.
And finally, I guess we should talk about the future of the Bowie knife. Do you see a future for this knife, or has it gone by the wayside in favor of folding knives?
No, I don't think it's gone by the wayside at all. I think that it will continue to be popular because the reality is it's a functional blade shape, and people buy knives for a couple of reasons. They buy knives because they need a knife for a certain job, and a lot of what influences which one they pick is, how it looks. So Bowie knives just kind of have a certain look that I think is just ingrained in people. They look great. They're pieces of artwork, and they're functional. There's so many custom bladesmiths out there that are still making Bowie knives. There's still companies who their main blade is a Bowie-style knife. And now we see modern folding knives with Bowie blade shapes and bearing the Bowie name. And so I think the future looks good. I don't think it'll ever go away. I think the Bowie knife is here to stay because people still love nostalgia, and they love holding on to kind of some of those classic designs and just putting some modern twists on it. So the Bowie knife as it stands, as it originally was, really has gone out of favor as far as carry goes. But the Bowie knife as a style, a blade shape, and an idea is still very popular.
Over 200 years with the Bowie knife. That is amazing. And again, tomato, potato, Bowie or Bowie, whatever it is an iconic American knife. And if my longtime friend and longtime listener Bill Harsey is tuning in from Crestwell, Oregon today, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this subject as well. Drew, thank you so much for sharing this with us. I hope you have yourself a very Merry Christmas.
Same to you. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it very much. Merry Christmas.
As we start to wrap things up, I'd like to thank our guests that appeared on the show today. That includes Drew Conover, who told you about the history of the Bowie knife, Trevor Hubbs with the Mule Deer Foundation and the new offshoot of that organization, the Blacktail Deer Foundation, and of course, Trey Carskadon, who told you about the Portland Boat Show coming to the Expo Center in Portland, Oregon, January 8th through the 12th. That's going to be a can't-miss event if you're in the market for a boat. Next weekend is that weekend that falls between Christmas and New Year's. And there's a reason why you almost never hear live shows during that time of year. It's because it's impossible to book guests during that week. Everyone's busy with family, friends, travel. So I'm going to join the club, and you will be hearing a best of edition of America Outdoors Radio next week. In the meantime, if you missed part of this show, you can go ahead and download it as a podcast in a few days. Just look for America Outdoors Radio wherever you listen to podcasts. On that note, it is time to go, but I do wish you a very Merry Christmas. I really appreciate the time you take to listen to this show, and I want nothing but good things for you during this holiday season. Now, I'm at an age where I don't get excited about gifts so much anymore, but I sure do treasure time with family and friends, and I hope you'll be blessed with that treasure as well. It's also a time to be contemplative, to think about the year past, and maybe make plans for the year ahead. It's also a time to think about the true meaning of Christmas, and that, of course, is the birth of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. So once again, Merry Christmas to you and yours, and until next time, do remember this. It is your country and your outdoors, so get out there and enjoy it.